about words of affirmation that we give to each other in our marriages, and also how to spend quality time with our spouse. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to cover 4 areas. One is love languages, ways we use to communicate our love between husband and wife. Then speaking words of affirmation, as I said, spending quality time with my spouse, and how we can do both these to really and truly enrich our marriages. So as I said, we express and communicate our love to our spouse in different ways. So some of us, we like to tell our husbands or our wives how much we love them. We use our words. Whereas some of us, we may enjoy giving gifts to each other, and that would express our love to our husbands and our wives. Others may like to do something for the person, some action, some helpful action, something to ease the burden of the other person. So that's another way a person may communicate love. So there are various ways, and some people like to communicate love by giving them a hug, holding a hand. So we all have different ways, words, actions, gifts. Now each of us have one main way of communicating this love, and that is our language of love. Now, my language of love may be different from my husband's language of love. So it's not only important that I am fluent in my language, but it's important that I understand how my husband also likes to express love. So for example, I may be someone who likes to express my love by telling my husband how much I love him. Whereas he may be someone who likes to give gifts. Yeah, so I must understand that when he's giving me a gift, that he's expressing his love for me. So this is called a primary love language, the main language in which we speak, in the ways we expect to give love and receive love. So broadly, the love languages, you can classify them as 5 different things. We use words, we can use gifts. Some of us like to, do acts of service, helping the other, and that's how we express our love. Some of us say, I express my love by spending some quality time with my spouse. That's the way I want to show my spouse that he or she is special. Whereas some of us, just by an act of touch, by just hugging, holding hands, reassuring, a reassuring touch, that's how we express our love. So speaking words of affirmation, spending quality time, giving gifts, doing acts of service, expressing our love through physical touch.
As Karen was saying, each of us has a primary love language, which may be different for different people. So for example, hers may be acts of service, in the sense that she loves it when I perform acts of service. Mine may be words of affirmation, expanding it beyond the spousal relationship. Our daughter, her primary love language is gifts. They need not be elaborate gifts, but there are they provide the primary love language of providing gifts has real meaning for her. And it's important, dear brothers and sisters, that we recognize what these love languages are among spouses. And for example, if Karen's love language is acts of service, then there's no point in me spending all my money giving gifts, because she wants me to wash the dishes, right? Or take out the garbage. So it's important that we understand and reflect what the spouse's primary love language is, right? Words. So let's talk a little bit about words of affirmation. Like we discussed, it's one of the love languages. It is to it is to state something or affirm someone with emotional support or encourage them with words. And very clearly, it is about saying something positive about the other person. Here's a quote from Mark Twain, who once said, "I can live for 2 months on a good compliment." I'm sure there are many among us who also conform to this thinking, right? Let's see what the Bible says about our words and speech. In Proverbs, we read that the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And really, what we are saying here is that the stakes are high. You can speak life or death using your tongue. The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. We've all come across this verse several times, and we see it manifested in our lives. We've seen that sometimes when you say encouraging words, you can build the person up, but the words of venom that are spoken can really crush the spirit. Ephesians says, "Do not let unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up, and that it may benefit those who listen." It's important that we understand that we have to use words to build each other up and use words that benefit the other person.
Sorry to interrupt here. I think your volume is a little low. You have to increase your mic volume.
Okay.
Or
Is
you have
this
to
better? Can I?
It is better. It is
Okay.
better.
Okay. An anxious heart weighs a man down, but a kind word cheers him up. Now, we're talking about words of affirmation that not only build the person up, but can also be important communicators of love.
Yeah, so let's look at what are the words, some examples of words of affirmation. I'm sure all the ladies here who are listening today, all you wives, I'm sure you would agree that if your husband, when we're about to go out somewhere and we've dressed up, wouldn't we love it if our husband said, "You're looking so beautiful in that outfit. Wow, that sari is so beautiful. Look at your eyes, the way they sparkle. I love how your hair is done." How wonderful that would make us feel, wouldn't it? And think of our husbands. When we tell him, when I go to work and he has to pick me up, he comes every day perfectly on time. He never misses. I'm never left waiting anywhere. And if I tell him that I appreciate it, for him, he feels that it has been noticed. What he is doing is not being taken for granted. So it's so important, and it would really build his spirit. It would really encourage him. He'd want to keep picking me up on time every day, right? Rather than me thinking nobody notices, nobody sees the effort I'm putting into this. But if his wife sees it, how wonderful it would make him feel. And I know that both husbands and wives, when we have our children, how there are days when, we can feel a bit down, especially as children are growing up, things get difficult at home and tense, and it feels really assuring if the person who is on your team, your partner, your husband, your wife, can say this to you. "I think you're a great dad. I think you're a great mom to our kids. They are really blessed to have you." How wonderful and reassuring it makes me feel when, especially, we have, as I said, teenage and almost teenage children. And, there are some days which can get a bit rough. But, to just hear, and when you're just feeling, "Have I done a good job today?" And to hear your husband say, "You're a fantastic mom. What you're doing, your children are really blessed to have you." How wonderful. I would feel so encouraged. And it would really build me up. And that's so important to hear from the one person who is the most important person in my life, my husband. So let's look, what are the different types of words of affirmation that we can use in our own marriages? What kinds of words? There are 3 kinds, I would say. Encouraging words, we can use kind words, we can use humble words. Now, I know that Brian is very good in writing, but because of his busy work, he doesn't really get so much time to do it. But I can encourage him. I can encourage him and say, you're such a fantastic writer. Why don't you develop this better? Why don't you do a course? Why don't you, write more? That would really encourage him to pursue his interest. That I don't want to pressure him into doing something I want him to do. For example, an encouraging word to him may not be, I think you should learn to cook, because I don't want to cook and I want him to do it. No, that's pressuring him to do something that I want him to do, but that's not what he wants to do. I have to encourage him and affirm him in his strengths, in his interests. So the other kind of words are kind words. So see what Colossians 4, see what St. Paul says in his letter to the Colossians, chapter 4, verse 6. Let your conversation always be, full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer. So the conversation that we spouses must have with each other, they must be sweet. They should not be, they must not be harsh. They must not bring down a person. They must truly be uplifting, and see Proverbs 15 verse 1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. We know that when we raise our voices, the reaction that we get can also be loud and can also hurt, right? It ruins the atmosphere at home. Scripture is so exact and pointing out what a gentle answer can do. It turns away wrath. So if someone's angry and they're speaking in anger, if we reply gently, we can soothe that anger. And yes, all of us sometimes we can get angry, but if the other person also gets angry, the entire home atmosphere is wrecked. So we've got to use kind words when we speak with each other. Humble words. Where I say humble words, love makes requests, not demands. So, I'm someone, there are times when I'm so busy with work that I say, oh, I don't want to cook. I'd rather get away from it. So let's order out. And there have been times, we've been eating out and endlessly ordering in. Now my husband, he doesn't like that. And, he wants me to cook. Now, there are two ways he can handle this. He can possibly say, every day we're eating this food from out, you don't even bother to go into the kitchen. It would be nice if you could just go in and cook. What's happening to our health? What would I say if he says that? I'd probably tell him, why don't you go in and cook, right? But there's another way he could do it. He could possibly says, I'm missing your cooking. You used to make that really delicious chicken curry. This outside food just doesn't have the same taste as if when you cooked it. Can you cook maybe sometime, just once? Can you try? Believe me, he will get chicken curry, that nice chicken curry, for the next 1 week. And there is peace at home. The atmosphere is cool. It's just the words that we choose to use with our spouse can either maintain a peaceful atmosphere, or it can cause strife. So we have to be careful and choose our words, use encouraging words, kind words, or humble words. So as I said, words of affirmation, they're not verbal flattery. They're not to get something that I want, and they just do not make demands.
So let's talk about some of the practical ways in which we can speak words of affirmation to my spouse, right? So here's a list of things. Why don't we start with making a list of all the numerous positive things about our spouses and list them down in a notebook or in our digital diaries, our phones, right? Because oftentimes when it's time to say something positive to our spouse, we may just not remember or we may not really have the right thing to say at that point in time. So it always helps to put this down and reflect on it so that we have it at the ready. When a friend compliments my spouse, make a note of it. So in the case of Karen, because she's a good musician, oftentimes when we go out, there are people who compliment her musical abilities, right? I always make it a point to note that down and come back and communicate it with her. Similarly, with other aspects of her life, whether it is to do with her competence at her work, how professional she is at her workplace, how her communications are great. Every time each of the people that I hear say something positive about my wife, I make it a point to put that down and come back and communicate it to her, right? So like I said, maybe Sundays or over the weekend when we have more time, it is time to think about one of those things that you want to say to your spouse that comes from the compliments, right? It could be when the spouse is present, but it could also be talking things that are positive about the spouse to other members of a family. Because in the early days when we were married, Karen didn't cook at all, and within her family, it was quite a bit of a joke about her cooking abilities or her inability to cook, right? And I knew that that always was a bit of a sore point or a sticking point with her. But over the years, she's become a fantastic cook. And I make it a point whenever I can to bring up her cooking when others are present, and they have come to recognize, of course, that she's a good cook and enjoy her dishes now. Right? Here are an example of some examples of what I can say about my wife. Well, she keeps her house clean and tidy. It may be a small thing, but let's not take it for granted. She's a good cook, like I mentioned. She does my laundry, so whenever I need something, it's always washed and ready. She balances work and home well, and more importantly, I don't need to sit and break my head with math and with Hindi with my children. So she helps the children with their homework. So these are some of the things that I could say that are positive about my wife.
And I have my own list about my husband. You know, it's important that I tell him, and he knows that I have noticed these things about him rather than just let it pass. You know, it's important that he knows that I have seen how wonderful he is at his job. I know that his clients praise him. I know that they really appreciate him. And I tell others also about it. I know that he manages the finances well, and I don't have to worry about how we're going to make ends meet or whether we'll have food on the table, because that's something he takes care of very well. As he said earlier, he helps me with the dishes. This for me is right on top, you know, there. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure a lot of wives would love this, and I'm sure many husbands are doing this as well. And he knows how much I value it, and he does it for me. And I don't like to take it for granted, because I know I know how much it takes of him to actually do this, and he does this willingly. He's a great dad to our children. You know, it's so important that my husband shows our children that he loves their mother. It's just so important. Our children see us as one team, as one unit. You know, especially as they're growing up, it's so easy for them to manipulate one against the other. But our children know that they can't do that, that we are one team. That's because he really is on my side, and he is on their side. He spends so much time with them, and I make it a point to tell him about this. And he takes very good care of his health, because that is important to us as a family, that he remains healthy. Being the head of the family, we need him to be in the best of health. You know, there was an experiment many years ago at IKEA. What they did was they took two identical plants, two pretty plants, identical plants in identical pots. They put them in two different rooms, which were also identical, and there were identical conditions: enough sunlight, enough air. They gave both the same amount of sunlight, the same amount of air, the same amount of water and nutrients. But they did one thing that was different. They went into one room and started praising that plant and saying, "What a wonderful plant you are. Look how beautiful your leaves are. Look how you just look at your stem. It's so strong and sturdy. You're going to be flowering so beautifully. Wow, you're just such a beauty to behold." And what they did with the other plant was, "Oh, you ugly looking thing. Look at your leaves wilting. No matter what we give you, you're so completely useless. You will never change. Same thing again and again. We give you the water, yet you never seem to grow." What do you think happened to those plants in a month? 1 month later, the plant in the first room that was complimented and spoken words of affirmation to was growing beautifully. Its leaves were growing beautifully. Whereas the plant in the other room that was spoken harsh words to, words that were discouraging and pulling it down, it started wilting. It actually started wilting. And remember, both these plants were identical when they started off. Yet one was growing and one was blossoming, whereas the other was dying. If this can happen to plants, how much more can it happen to us human beings who are so much higher in the order of creation that God made, right? And we have to keep in mind that, words of affirmation is something that we need to use regularly in our marriages, because God has given us this person to care for, to nurture. And if we use our words to say negative things, they will die a slow death, and we will die a slow death along with them. But instead, if we use words of affirmation to build, we will both grow and blossom together. So always speak words that uplift. Always use words of affirmation. Someone once said, "The words you speak become the house you live in." That's what will happen to our homes. When people enter our homes, based on what the conversation has been in our homes, they will be able to sense peace or strife. So it's so important, my brothers and sisters, to think about this and reflect on our own homes and our own conversation between husband and wife. Is it truly seasoned with salt, as St. Paul told the Colossians? Is it filled with grace? And if it's not, let's make a conscious decision to do something to change that. Just baby steps, little things. Can we start affirming our spouses more?
We now move on to talking about quality time with our spouses. What does quality time really mean? It is, in a world that has so many pulls and pressures, giving someone undivided attention. And what are some of the ways that we can do that? Going for a walk together and talking, more importantly, on that walk. Going out for a meal or having a meal together. In the current circumstances, it may not always be possible to go out for a meal, but really spending time with the spouse. Enjoying other activities, whether it's an indoor game, watching a movie, just spending time with each other, but more importantly, talking, right? And having no distractions. Like I said, we all know, we live in such a world that has such fractured attention spans. So it's important to give complete attention and focus on the time that you spend with your spouse, right? Here's what the Bible says: live joyfully with your wife whom you love all the days of your life, right? So live joyfully, take delight in her company. The time that we spend with our spouses, let it be pleasant. Let us rejoice in the time, the gift that God has given us in this partner, and value that time, and really focus on how critical and valuable that is, right? In a world that is so busy, we have to make time for our spouses, because when you give time to someone, you give someone something that is really, really precious, because when you give time, it's gone, right? You never get it back, which is why time is so very, very precious. So some of the practical ways in which we can spend quality time with our spouse. like I said, focused attention without the distractions of all of these things. Clearly, I was reading the survey which talked about how the average time that people spent on devices has gone up about 25%. Prior to the pandemic, it was about 4 hours. Now it's about 5 hours. There is social media. There's so much to distract, right? But I think it's not about just being with a person and going about doing their own thing. Like, it doesn't make sense for me to read the newspaper in one room and my wife is cooking in the kitchen and then saying, I spent time with my wife. It means sitting and having a conversation face to face, or spending some time doing an activity that you both love. That is separate from all the distractions, right? So quality conversation. There is so much to talk about in life with our spouses. There is our dreams and aspirations for the future. There are the anxieties and fears that we may sometimes feel. There is decisions about children. There are decisions about finances. There are decisions about health. There are decisions about in-laws. There is everything that is coming up in the news. So there is a lot to talk about. So it is important that we all make sure that we are sitting together and having this dialogue that is friendly, that is uninterrupted. When you're in some ways provoking your spouse to talk about it, using questions, not really badgering them, but really with the motivation to understand the person better. What are some of the triggers that are leading your spouse to behave in a particular way? And also share the vulnerability about why I perhaps behaved in a particular way, so that the spouse is also able to understand you. Yeah. Maintaining eye contact, listening for feelings, observing how they are responding to what you're saying, and not making it an advice column. I think there is enough of that on social media and everywhere else. It is important to just let the conversation be free flowing, and let my wife or my husband be comfortable in that space.
Yeah, so learning to talk, as Brian said, we have to learn to have conversations. Now, when I say learning to talk, it doesn't mean you have to go and buy bread now. What time you're going to work? Okay, don't forget to pick up the children. Those are all mundane things that will be spoken about every day. But we need to have conversations that really are about our feelings, about how did you feel when your boss, told you about this today? You've got to, or how did it feel, when your daughter spoke to you like this? Or, you didn't meet a deadline and you got into trouble. How did that feel? How are you feeling right now? What do you intend to do about it? Those are the kind of things that we need to share with one another. As husband and wife, if we don't share with one another, then who do we share with? God has put us together. He's brought us together to be partners on this journey, and we need to be able to communicate with each other clearly and not bottle it up or find outlets elsewhere, to share our feelings. That the common complaint of many wives is, my husband hardly speaks to me, he's always quiet, and I'm the one who's talking and talking. If I ask him what, he says nothing. This is a common complaint, but I think sometimes it's the other way around. It's not only with wives. Sometimes the husbands are the ones who talk, and the wives are the ones who are quiet. So as I said, unless we are in touch with what we are feeling ourselves, how are we going to tell another person? So it's important to understand, get in touch with our own emotions, our own feelings about what's going on, rather than just suppress it, just not talk about it. It's important that we share this with our spouse. So there are two types of personality. One person only listening and receiving nothing, no sharing. Whereas the other one, Excessive sharing, everything is out, nothing, no time to listen. So as couples, we need to have a good balance of both, of being able to speak as well as being able to listen. So yes, we need to establish a daily sharing time. So Brian and I, every day now with the kids being at home because of online schooling, they start their school early in the morning. So that kind of gives us time. Brian has to work from home, I have to work from home. So we make time every morning once the kids are in their rooms, in their school classes. We sit at our breakfast table and we have breakfast together and we talk about possibly the previous day, what has happened, because we may not have had time to discuss what had happened the previous day. We talk about what the day holds for us. We always ask each other, how does the day look for you? What do you have planned? And sometimes when you say things like that, say, I'm not looking forward to this activity. I'm really not, I have to make this call, but I'm not looking forward to it. It makes such a big difference to be able to share this with your spouse. And so often, we establish this time is just Brian's and my time. No children during that time. We do have a sharing time with the family, but this time at breakfast is just our time together, and it happens every day. So it's so important that couples are able to dedicate some time during this day to share, to really share, and rather than make it once in maybe 2 weeks, once in 3 weeks, once in a while when it happens. If we make a commitment to have a daily sharing time, we'll find that we're able to even talk better. We're able to share our emotions better. We're able to share our feelings and get in touch with what's going on inside of us much better. Then we can also do some quality activities together. There's this person who said, I feel most loved by my wife when we do the things together, things that I like to do and that she likes to do. We talk more. It feels like we are dating again. It's a good idea to think back to the time when you first met each other and you were courting. What were the things that you like to do together? Maybe go for a walk together, go have dinner together. Brian and me, we're both into music. I remember that when we were courting, we used to love to sing together, and we try to do this again, quite often, just the two of us. It just helps in bonding. We like, another thing we love to do is we love to play board games. It really helps just doing some activity together. It could be anything for you if you think back, but it needs to be something that both of you like. So it could be dancing, it could be cooking, whatever works that both of you enjoy. Now, Brian loves to go to the gym and he goes for 1 hour every day. Now, he can come back and insist, I want you also to come to the gym with me. Now, that's not going to be really quality activity for me and quality time for me, because that's not what I enjoy. Similarly, I love doing crossword puzzles, but I cannot insist that Brian does crossword with me because he does not like that. So it must be something that both of you enjoy doing together that can really help you bond. So how do we make a start? Maybe you can commit to taking a walk every day or every other day. Just walk and just, have conversation. Just generally, we sometimes do this. We go for a walk and we talk about just general myriad things. You can ask questions about your spouse's childhood, and you never know, there's always something that you never knew about your spouse that you will learn. And it's important to listen. Once you ask the question, be prepared to listen. It's like, when you ask, when Brian asks me how was my day, he needs to be prepared to listen because I have a lot to say about how my day was. Another thing that, you could possibly do for those of us who are not really in the habit of spending quality time together, not doing things together, maybe just to make a start, I would suggest just each of you, by yourselves, make 5 activities that you love doing and that you would love to do with your husband or with your wife. And then discuss this list, and I'm sure you all can come to an agreement on what you can do together that could be really spending that quality time together. Why? It can be anything. I would say that even watching a movie together, however, make that limited because it doesn't really involve bonding with each other, but more bonding with the TV. So you can do that together, but I think that should be one of the later things. Do something else that involves both of you really communicating, or enjoying doing something together, you know. Go on a date. Now, going on a date in our current circumstances may be a bit hard, but you can still make time and block. Things are opening up, at least here in Karnataka, things are opening up. We can still go out together somewhere. But what it also means is make time for yourself, just your husband, just the husband and wife without the children. So, we can, in fact, this weekend, we decided that we would send our children to their grandparents' home, just so that we could have some time, some break away from the kids. Now with everyone being at home 24/7, it becomes hard to actually spend time. So we decided to send the children for the weekend. They were looking forward to spending it with their grandparents, and we were looking forward to some quality time together. So that is something that could be done.
Yeah. So just to continue what Karen was saying, setting aside time for a weekend or a time that you can spend together. Often we spend most of our time talking to our friends about how our day went. I've seen, and I've been guilty of it too, posting how we are feeling and what we are doing on social media rather than sharing it with the person closest to us. So it's important that I think rather than letting the world know, it is important for the spouse to understand where you're coming from, what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. Right? Here, we may have individual pursuits of our time, the individual pursuits that each of us have, and it's important that we make sure that these individual pursuits don't cut away from the time that you would spend with the family or with your spouse. As Karen mentioned, I love running. There was a point in time where I used to run these full marathons and half marathons, 42 kilometers, and running 42 kilometers requires you to train to run 42 kilometers, right? So every weekend I used to spend say 2-3 hours running or training to run. But then I realized after a point in time that those 2-3 hours, I mean, it's not like I'm going to become an Olympic athlete, right? So it's just to reframe what we want out of life and where we are headed. So I've brought that running down to just a few minutes a day. I still work out, but I've spent more time spending time with the family. So it would mean making perhaps compromises of things that you may want to individually do, but always placing the relationship first, placing your spouse before you is something that is important. So just to conclude, words like we've discussed have power. And it's important that the person that is most important to us, the closest to us, our family members, receive the best of us. Some years ago, when I worked in the Middle East, there was this client of mine who wasn't particularly a pleasant person. But just because he was my client, I used to make it a point to make sure that I would say something positive about him. So on my drive to the meeting, I used to actually think of things that I could potentially say about this nasty person. So it could be things like, oh, I love your tie or whatever, right? But then one day it struck me that here I was going out of my way to be so nice and to say the right things about this person, whereas I wasn't spending that much time talking about the wonderful things about my wife, right? So let's all remember about this person that we have, who God has given us to spend our life alongside, and make sure that they receive the best of us in terms of time, in terms of the words, in terms of all the efforts to build the person up. When we give our spouse our time, we give them a part of our life. Today, dear brothers and sisters, time is the most precious gift. Praying for the person, giving the person the time is something that you can really do for the person. And like I said before, it's a very important emotional communicator of love. So make it a point to spend as much time as possible. We all know that whatever we spend our time on, that's the thing that we excel ultimately when we look back, right? So the more time we spend in prayer, the more time we spend in our relationship with God, our relationship strengthens. Similarly, the more time we spend with our spouse, engaging in true open conversation and listening, that relationship will also be strengthened. So do spend time talking, do spend time praying with your spouse, and I'm sure your lives will continue to be a blessing to your family, to each other, and to those around you.
Yeah, so thanks for giving us once again, Brian and I, this opportunity to speak at this retreat. We really hope and we pray that God will help you, truly reflect on your own marriages and see in what ways, you can, which areas you can actually use these words of affirmation to truly build up this most important person in your life. After God, it's your spouse. And it's our responsibility as husbands, as wives, to build up our spouse with our words and not break them down, not pull them down. Because our words have lasting consequences. And as Brian said, our time is the most precious gift that we can give our spouse. Over to the animator now.
So thank you very much. A heartfelt thanks on behalf of all the participants to Brother Brian and Sister Karen for enlightening us with your spirit-filled talk on affirmation and quality time.